Resume recording. So I'm looking here and I still only see the same two questions. No new questions. So do we have any additional questions? So like, what was some of the insights in the homework? Anybody want to volunteer? Was there a pain point with the homework? Was it easy? Like, man, this is so easy.
I think it's just the sending state down so many components and having to keep track of it is a bit of a pain.
Okay.
So I had a pain point where I didn't know necessarily. I saw what we were trying to do with passing the state down, and then I saw that you needed at one point to accept parameters for that, but I didn't know at what point to inject the parameters, and I thought you would need to do it with like event target value on the click and assigning a value to each one. But I got a little overwhelmed and I didn't finish the homework, so I'll be bad today. My bad.
Okay.
And it was helpful to see how Demola did it in his, where it's passed in not on the bottom level, right? But it's passed in one of the props that he's sending down, right? Because he's passing in the parameter as he's passing the whole thing, which was really interesting to see, because that's something we didn't cover in class.
Yeah. Let's take a look. So as part of the homework, right? Obviously, these are the solutions. These are, my official solutions for the homework assignments. I've also included originally we had, the React architecture, and we started with this one React architecture, but I also put together a architecture for Films Lab 2 to kind of, once again, take a look at and see how it was organized, right? So I'm kind of big on the architecture, and I'm going to just suggest you follow that same suit in regards to seeing how things are laid out, right? So in the Films 2, we had app. App was a class-based component, and fave is a class-based, and everything else was just, at least this design, were functional components, okay? I think film listing here, actually no, film listing is state, so I gotta change that. Let me go here. Film listing was a state-based component, right? There's a fill color here. Why is this not?
You have to do the paint bucket. That's the highlight color.
The paint, okay, yeah, all right. So film listing is also a class-based component, right? So it has state. It was filtering all. Props was because I have props here, that means app is passing props down, right? That's why we have something in props. If any of these components have something in their props, that means they're getting it from the parent component. So the parent component was inheriting it, passing it down. We had a handle filter click, which updates state to change the filter to either faves or all, right? And that change was where we saw, if I go back here and I'll just open up our second solution just so we can see it, right? That was just this, right? Just clicking on these and updating state for that, okay? And by updating states there, we were able to do some conditional logic to turn on or add a active class to either this, div or this div, right? That's really all it was doing. So if I go to film listing has the all and faves, right? These are the text that's being presented there. And then there's just some conditional logic here that would show if state.filter, if it's equal to all, then return is active, and then it becomes is active. Else, return nothing. And so we would essentially remove the is active class, right? Film row just was being passed down all the films as well, right? Or film listing is rendering all of the film rows. So state we're passed down films here. And when we get passed down films, we have an array of films, and we're looping through, and then passing that down. I think film here wasn't an array. It was just an object, just a single object, right? If we loop through an array of objects here, right, this would have been multiple films, right? And we pass that down. We loop through, we create a film row, and we create as many film rows as needed for each one of those rows, okay? And so it gets films, and it gets a single object, and that object then gets passed further down to film poster, where we would grab the film poster, props, and then fave. And so fave also had a state. So this was us having kind of multiple states here. State here is fave, and is fave was able to determine if it was a fave or not, right? Hey, this thing itself knew all about itself, okay? And if I clicked on that and I unclicked that, clicked on it again, didn't affect this yet, but we knew that it would know if its fave is false or true, right? Originally it's false. You click on it, changes to true, and then all of a sudden there was some conditional logic there to like give it this additional class or remove that class, right? Once again, there was a films being passed down to fave, so we have all the data too. So this would have been an object as well. I believe it was an array. And then we also had this handle click. Handle click updated this, and that's how we managed it here, right? That was the design for films part 2. So let's take a look at films part 3 and see what that looks like in comparison. Right, there's a lot more going on here, right? You can clearly see there's a few more moving parts now, and state now lives in the app component. Before, the app component was a class-based component, but it didn't have any state. It was just created as a class-based component, I think, just to get everything started, but it didn't need to be at that time. If it doesn't have state, it doesn't need to be a class-based component. But we essentially moved state from here. So I color-coded it red. We moved state from fave, and we kind of made the decision that fave wouldn't need to know or keep track of whether it was a fave or not. We decided to use some other mechanism to do that, some other logic. And so this state here was raised up here. Now, essentially the state of like, is fave true or false, itself, that logic is going to be evaluated at some point in time, and that logic was kind of moved over here. Film row now passes down a prop called isFave. So this was really moved into a prop, and the fact that it was moved to a prop means it needs to be sent down to it, and it was being sent down from the film row. Okay, now film row, obviously if it's a prop, it must be getting it from film listing. Film listing has an array of faves, right? And state has an array of faves, and so you can see props, faves here is an array of things, right? So we know that this now is passing down to film listing. Film listing is looping right here. Film listing loops over the films array and renders the film row component. And during that process, it evaluates whether the thing was found in faves. If it's found in the faves array, then it's like, oh, isFave is true, or isFave is false. And that's where the array dot prototype dot thing came into play there. Okay, so if I go and I open up the solution, and we go to film listing, right? So if I take a look at film listing now, I'm gonna make sure all this works too, right? Faves are updating. If I click on faves, I only see faves. If I unclick this, it gets removed automatically, right? And so this balance act between what's here and what's here, right? All never ceases, it's always all, but faves changes depending on what you click, right? So I'm gonna go to film listing and see, and I see, according to our design, film listing loops over right here, the films array and renders a new film row. And so film row knows the film, all the information about the film is stored in film. And so this is an object, right? Because it's an array of objects. That's what we're dealing with. When you do the mapping over something, you need to have a key, right? So the decision here in this design was to use the ID of the key, but we could have easily chosen the index of the ID. It really didn't make a difference here, whether it was the index position in the array or the ID associated with it, right? And then isFav, this was the logic now. So instead of the fav component itself, keeping track in state of like, am I a fav, am I not a fav, right? We run that logic in the looping construct, and so it does this .props.favs if it includes that object. That's what this does. The includes method just says if the object, this D is truly an object, right? That contains the name of the film, the year of the film, the image of the film, all of that. If it includes it, set it to true. If it doesn't include it, set it to false. That's what includes does, okay? So if you did look up array.prototype.includes, you would have come to that conclusion that that's what it did. Okay, there's other ways to do this, but this is really the tersest way to do this thing. And then it would know if it's true or false, pass that down, and then we had these two additional methods being passed down here, onFav toggle and onDetails click. And those are being passed down also, okay, because they're props. Now what I want you to see is that onFav's toggle is the same name that we're giving to the method that was passed down, onFav toggle. It's the same name, and so we're trying to keep track of these methods that are getting passed down further down the hierarchy. If I keep them the same name, then they're easy to keep track of instead of changing the names around, okay? This is what was passed down to us. This is what we're going to pass down as our naming convention. This could change. If we wanted to, we could change this, okay? And I believe, Gustavo, this is where I'm going to assume you were just discussing maybe adding the element there and passing it up, right? Because when you click on it, right, we could add it here, or we could have passed it further down and then just did it further down, down in the film row itself, right? Actually, Fav, it would have been done on Fav, okay? So I'm going to go back to the architecture here. Oh, that's the old one. Here we go. Here's the architecture, okay? So we know that this state here has been moved. In essence, the state has been moved as a prop here that's being passed down, and this prop is truly just an evaluation of whether the thing existed in this favs array, which is this favs array, right? Essentially, we had to move the state of the favs, kind of looking to see if they themselves needed to be updated versus passing it up to a higher state or a higher lifting state to a higher component in our architecture, okay? Now this onFav toggle, right, because that's the thing now that's doing the updating, right? So I have a handle click in Fav, and that executes this props onFav toggle, right? And this props.onFav toggle is what was passed down to us. So if I just color code this so we can kind of maybe follow the path up. So this is onFav toggle, right? This onFav toggle got passed to us from here, right? Here's the other onFav toggle is being passed to us. This onFav toggle got passed to us from here, right? And that was passed to us from here, right? So we see that this method that was created in app was passed down to film listing as handle fav toggle, We renamed it to onFav toggle here and passed it down to the film row. Film row maintained that naming convention, onFav toggle. This is onFav toggle from up there, right? And then we passed it down to here. So this would really be onFav toggle is this dot props, right? That's what that would be at that point in time. So would this be also, right? This dot props dot, because we're getting this passed down from there. Okay, and this would also be this dot props and this dot props. And now we know that because we're in props, right? So we know that we're getting that. So we can see that things are getting, I guess, a little bit more complicated, right? And I think, Stephen, you mentioned like passing all this stuff down, right? It can get a bit confusing after a while. Like this thing here needs to be executed down here or kind of clicked on down here, but it actually gets evaluated up here, right? So that may be one of the confusing points there too, right? I'm passing this function down, 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 only to when I click on it here, I'm executing the context of that up here. That's where it gets truly evaluated up here in the handle fav toggle. And then that's just responsible for adding or removing whatever you sent up to the favs array in state. And updating state triggers a re-render, and so state would then pass all of these things back down the chain, and the elements themselves, the components, would then evaluate, do they need to update? Is there anything different in what they have that they would need to change? And really, in the end, it would be this, right? Is fav will be true or false depending on the one thing that we clicked, okay? So mapping out the architecture is definitely one way to kind of wrap your head around what's being passed down and how deep that thing goes, okay? And you got to get used to this kind of design. There's better ways to do this. We're going to be learning about context, which is one of the more advanced React concepts, as well as Redux, which is a third-party tool to help manage state and try to get something from where it needs to go, from where it is, directly to where it needs to go, versus doing all of this passing down. Because after a while, this design, pretty basic. In all honesty, it's just, 6 components, and it's only, 3 levels deep. Nothing really too complicated there, but other architectures are going to be way more complicated. And to get something and pass it down, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 steps in the hierarchy can lead to like confusion as to what it is and where it is. So if we just go back and take a look at it, right? So I'll just start with the app, because the app now has those 3 things, right? Films, and we're importing films now, and we're just storing it in here. And we have faves, and then we have current. We have the handle toggle, right? And that is responsible for updating the faves array and either adding or removing. So this adds and this removes from there. Did anyone do this any differently? I'm just curious if anyone used something else besides an if-else statements.
I used a ternary statement, and I was comparing if it was equal to -1 as opposed to greater than -1. That's the only thing that was different.
Okay. So we could have done something like, this could have been, and it does look like here, we're setting state right here, right? So this logic is right here, and then it makes the difference of what we do with faves, and then it will update state based on that. So you could have done something like, film index, right, is greater than -1. If it is greater than -1, then we could have just done this. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put that there, or we could have done this. I'm going to put that there. And then I'm just going to comment that out, okay? So we could have done this ternary operator here to simplify this if-else statement. But I want to make a point that a lot of the times when we teach JavaScript, we teach it from the beginning for people that are learning JavaScript. We teach it with the intention that you kind of write it in a way so that the next person could intuitively understand that. So if I was writing this for someone that wasn't really solid with JavaScript, they were just learning it, I would opt to do it this way because an if-else statement really makes sense. It's really self-explanatory. If this, do that. A ternary operator, if you've never seen it or you don't work with it, takes just a little bit more time to be like, oh, what is happening there? Okay. We still need to splice the thing out of the array. We got to get it out of the array, right? It's got to be removed. We have to figure out a way to remove it. So splicing is the way to remove it, and pushing it would be the way to get it into the array. So this would need it. What's this doing? What does slice do here? And would there have been another way to do that? Here we're doing splice, which is like a meticulous, like find the thing in the array and like remove just that thing. But what does slice do? What's the end result of this?
You're copying the state faves into a variable called faves that's not part of the state.
Okay, that's what it does, right? Slice could also be used to do what splice does. Like we didn't give this any parameters, but we could, and slice would just find the thing, return a copy of the thing, but it wouldn't mutate the array. Splice is a mutator. It actually goes in the array and mutates the array, removing the thing completely. It's like a pop or something, like get it out of the array. Another way to do this, we could have done, this is how I would have done it, but you might see something like this also. Const faves is equal to this dot state dot faves dot map d, something like this. I'm just choosing D as the naming convention. I choose D for data. But this could easily have been E for, element. Doesn't really matter. I just kind of prefer D is what I do. D and I are the two arguments I almost always use. And so we could have done that as well. Now it's screaming at me because I have two faves, right? Both of them work. Map is meant to map over something and return every instance of it. So I didn't mutate anything in here. I just did it, and it still works, right? Everything is working fine. I go to faves, undo it. It's all good. So there's different ways to do it, however you decided to do it. I probably would have opted to maybe do this way versus this way. Once again, I'm used to using slice to create duplicate copies of arrays, but map also is something I might have chosen to do. I'm not sure. And then to get the index of the thing too. You just wanted to see if the thing is there, right? faves.index.film. If it is, I have the index and then I can do something with it, okay? And then app passes it down to film listing, right? So we pass the films, all of the faves. We pass our fave toggle and our handle click, right? And then film details really isn't doing much. Film details will ultimately have the details of the film yet, but that just hasn't been developed out yet. We go to film listing. Film listing also has state. It's got filter all, right? So we know that that has state. And then it has the handle click. Once again, that's just checking to see if these are clicked. And then it loops over the films row, passing those elements down to the film row right here. And then film row then renders out the poster so we can see the poster. So this whole row is what films row is rendering, and the poster is its own component. The summary is just some HTML there, right? And then the fave itself is now being passed the toggle. It's a props. It's not a this.props because it's a functional component. It's not class. And then the isFave is also being passed down. Once again, this isFave was evaluated at a parent. We could have evaluated it here too, right? We could have passed it down and we could have evaluated it, I suppose, here. And then fave, right? It's fave here, gets it, and fave is still responsible for, deciding whether it should add this class or that class, depending, and it's using the isFav now, whether it's true or false, to do that. Okay, it still has the onClick. I got to click it, but now this onClick here calls this onClick, right? This onFav toggle just calls it, and the onFav toggle is already configured in Film Row, right? OnFav toggle, nope, actually it's in Film Listing, right? Here it's still being passed down, and in Film Listing is where OnFav toggle is now passing that thing up, okay? You're gonna see this a lot too, where you're mapping over, you can just pass the element into the methods. So I can execute it. Since I'm already mapping over it, I already know I have a handle on the thing, right? If I have a handle on it, I can just pass it in. If it gets clicked, remember this here, this callback is the pausing mechanism. This only gets run when the thing gets clicked, okay? Only when the event is triggered will this get executed, and when it does get executed, it'll just pass up the actual element, okay? So yeah, there were a few more moving parts, and hopefully the architecture here, obviously in hindsight, now you have the architecture, you can go back, you can take a look at it, and you can see now how it is. I'm going to change Film Listing because Film Listing is a stateful component, right? So it looks like Film Listing is, that's too dark, right? Is also, okay, Film Row. Right, I go back here, let's go to Film Listing. It's a state-based component. So this will help. What's up?
I think you flipped it because pink is functional.
Oh yeah, that's right. Forgot. That's why I added. Okay, and Film Row doesn't have state, and this does. Okay, cool. Got my colors mixed up there for a second. Does this make sense? Like, does it help seeing the diagram? I know I've seen in the exit ticket feedback that has helped. Seeing the diagram helps, drawing out and like visually drawing lines and saying, oh, this went here and this gets passed down and this gets passed down might help you also, okay? It's hard enough just kind of looking at the components to be like, where is the thing, right? That's not always easy to do. So color coding these things sometimes helps you see the path of where they're going. It started from here, it got past here, here, and now it's here, and I can see the connection between them, okay? That helps me visually when I do this, okay? Cool. As far as the films, there's only one more iteration of this, and it's to make an API call. So you'll be making an API call to the films database, to the Films API to pull the movies themselves. Okay, instead of using a file to do this, we're going to be doing that as an API call, which is kind of like what we're doing today to learn about API calls, with the intent that on Thursday when I assign the homework, you'll have enough to replace this film's file with an actual call to make the API call, okay? Do we have any other additional kind of lingering questions about the homework?
I don't think you ever answered the question that was in the sheets.
Okay, let's go. So these two questions, right? All right, so Abner, you were using set state to change state, but accidentally only set one of the keys when the state object had multiple keys. However, it still worked. Okay, let's take a look at yours and walk me through what happened.
Okay, so in app.
Sure.
In app, if you look at the handle fave toggle,
Sure.
I mean, this is the same thing that you did. You just do set state faves, but how come current and films in the state object is not replaced by like emptiness? It's just not. It's not just gone.
Okay, so we're talking which method again? This one or this one?
Either one really. It's just that when you use set state, you're only modifying.
Oh yeah, state.
You're only using one key.
Oh, I got you. So this is not the same as nested objects. So when I had demoed it, we had the form, right? The login form. And the login form had state had a nested object called form data. Nested objects in state would need to copy over all the previous keys, but not the top level of state. State is aware of these 3 keys, and it expects that you update one or more of those keys, but it keeps track of the other keys. It's not the same with the login form. Let me just see if I can pull up the login form real quick. Because I think that's what you're referencing, right?
Right. I thought it was the same thing happening, and then it didn't happen. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. I think what you're mentioning is, let me see, is it form? I think it was form. Right here. This is what you were talking about. Now you see state is an object that has a key of is remembered, and it has a nested object called form data. When we update form data, we have to also copy over all of the form data keys. In this instance, we're either updating username or password, depending on which one was clicked on handle change, but we also need to get a copy of all the other keys. The only reason why we need to do this here is because it's a nested object. This object is attached to this key, which is a key in this object, okay? That's the only reason why we need to do that. State is fully aware of all the top level key value pairs, and so when you do the update here, like we were just saying, or here, right? Yeah, where it was. Thumbs up right here, right? You don't have to. Okay? That makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, I got it. So you only need to worry about nested objects and
Yes.
arrays, I guess.
Only nested objects. Any nested key. Okay? So if I have a key that has an object, whatever those key value pairs are in that object, and I update one of those key value pairs, I have to make sure I copy all the others, or I will lose those keys and their corresponding values. Okay?
All right, gotcha.
Thank
Thank you.
You
I
can
think,
actually,
we originally demoed that. I remember demoing it and then like, oh my God, we lost it. But up to that point, we never lost any of the top level state key value pairs. We never actually lost those. Only when we tried to nest it did we actually lose it.
I guess I just didn't notice that.
No, it happens. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of material just kind of being thrown at you, and it's like, do the thing. And to go back 3 weeks to be like, hey, remember when we did the thing? I do that all the time in class. Hey, remember 3 weeks ago when we did this? And like everyone's like, I don't remember. That was 3 weeks ago. If you don't use this stuff every day, it's not going to stick, right? So if you just do the homework an hour every other day, this React isn't really going to stick as if you do it every day. So try to make sure you spend some time every day. Michael, just a comment, the step 12 should have been after, should have been step 5.
But actually, I mean, in our little group together, I figured out what was wrong, what I did wrong.
Oh, okay.
I forgot to pass down, well, I changed the name of handle fave toggle.
Sure.
Instead of saying, I mean, I just got confused when I was looking at the instructions.
Okay.
So I had handle fave toggle as a property. And instead of calling, I think in your instructions it says call like on fave toggle. So I got mixed up. So that was just like my bad when I was looking at it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, were the instructions okay though? I mean, I've gotten with these particular assignments, especially when I assign them in the day class, they actually think, hey, this was too easy. Like you kind of fed me how to do it. Like you just gave me the step-by-steps and they weren't like challenged, but that's a different degree. Like they want to be, and they really need to like work their way through it. Being a part-time class, these types of assignments are meant to kind of get you to a level of success. Like, follow this and you'll get to do the thing, and along the way you'll learn, versus like someone else who needs to figure it out.
Yeah, I guess when you get excited and you're trying to figure it out, you kind of jump over things, and so that was like one of my issues. So I was like, okay, I need to read, make sure I understand what's going on.
And I think just, going forward, coming up with this, and maybe before you do anything, read the instructions and then go over here and start like just mapping out the things and where they're being created and what's being passed down. Just like once through the instruction set, see if you can map out your ideas here and then go back and start building it out. Because if you can go through the instructions, map the things out here, at least the value, true or false, this isn't telling me how I do it, right? You still have to figure out how to use includes there. But at least if you see true or false, you'd be like, oh yeah, it's got to be true or false. I'll figure that out later. But you see where the things are actually coming down from and what their values are. This, I think, would help. I don't think anyone really went. Did anyone actually go out of their way to like try to map it out? I know I asked for it from day one. I know on the homework I was like, hey, give me your React architecture, but I'm not sure anyone went back to it. I think everyone just gets excited, right? I'm going to build a thing. I'm going to do the thing. I don't need to map it out. I'll figure it all out. I get excited too. But taking a step back, especially when you start working on your final project, right, which we're going to start in week 5. You're going to get assigned. You're going to start working on it. It's going to be a really good idea to map out everything as best as you can before you start coding, because there's going to be a lot of levels of complexity, okay? So, and we'll go through I'll show some of the projects that the day class had put together, so you can get an idea of maybe what you're going to be shooting for, where you might be hitting that edge of like, that's a lot of stuff. I don't know if I could do that in 5 weeks, because there's still more material to cover. Okay, so I guess we'll move on here. Let's see. It's only 2 questions. So if you do have any additional questions, by all means, ask the questions. I was hoping to elicit more questions, but, get what we got. All right, so I'll close these. Awesome. It's our homework. Bloop. All right. So we're going to discuss making API calls. So I'm going to kind of reference, when it comes to the lectures, I'm more of a code along person and just kind of build it out, code along. We don't have a lot of time, so me like looking at the lecture and being like, this is the thing, just really kind of, I feel at times slows us down. I do want to take a poll. I just want to see real quick a poll. Who makes or who uses fetch to make API calls? Yes. No. Here we go. Have used fetch to make API calls. All right. Typing out a poll. And the poll is, have you used fetch to make an API call? Okay. Yes. There we go. So I'm going to see probably a few yeses, a few nos. Okay. If you haven't used fetch, have you used another tool? Or does anyone use other tools? I mean, you can type the tool out in the Slack channel, and I'll just open up. I'll start a thread here and say, what other tools have you used, if any? And then just, I just started a little thread here. If you used other tools, what have they been? Axios, yeah, Axios is another standard tool that we use here. Firebase, okay, Firebase. Okay, I mean, I work with Firebase, and I thought we still needed to make the API call using one of these, hitting an endpoint. None, okay. All right, so we have a few that have, several that haven't. Just wanted to kind of get a feel. Okay, cool. So API calls are a huge deal when you're kind of developing these apps. And the reason is we need to get data, right? I can build the most amazing little Instagram app, but where am I getting my data from? Am I always going to have a file that I'm going to update? And how do I write to the file in the end? So we're always going to tie in, or your apps are almost always going to tie in to some sort of back end where you can pull data, at least pull data. And there's so many APIs out there to pull free data that's out there. And then you can grab multiple different endpoints and then aggregate them together and like give the user a new way of seeing different data points. Okay, it's a really cool way of doing it. But you still need to make the call. And when you make the call, you can get data, you can post data, you can delete data, you can update data. Fetch is used for that communication back and forth between the server. Okay, and so Fetch is really, it comes with ES6. It's a tool that came with it, which made it really easy for like, hey, you want to make a call? Fetch, here's a new tool, work with it. Okay, Axios is a tool that you would need to install. It's a third-party tool that's kind of running Fetch under the hood anyway. And it's kind of easier to use, but you're going to see Fetch everywhere, and you don't need to install anything in order for Fetch to work. So I'm going to do this just to test out Fetch. Code alone, make API calls. I have, I'm going to do this. I wanted to keep it really, really simple. So I have this code pen here. I just kind of wanted to work with some basic making the calls, and then I will discuss how to incorporate it into React. Okay. So I have a few APIs here, okay? And these APIs all pull data. So if I go here to this random user API and I put it into my browser and I go, hey, API, look, I get data. Now, if you see the data, does everyone see the data kind of like this, or do you see it like that? Okay. So I'm just going to put a poll here. See data parsed or not? Okay. Parsed, not parsed. Okay. Boop, boop, boop. All right. So I put another poll in there. If you were to grab that API and put it in there, not parsed, okay, not parsed, cool. There's a little tool, because you don't ever want to look at data like this. This is really hard to kind of parse through this thing. If you're not seeing it parsed in the browser, then there's a tool that we want to install, and it is the, let me go to my extensions here. It depends on the browser. Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the browser. I guess the tool as well. Is everyone using, I'm assuming everyone's either using Chrome or Firefox, right? I don't think anyone's using Safari, unless there's, yeah, you're using Chrome too, right? So this tool here is, I think it's called JSON Formatter for Chrome. It's a Chrome extension. And they should have it also for Firefox. So this is the extension. I'm going to Slack it out. That's the extension. If you install that extension, you'll be able to parse the data. And this is the little icon right here. Here's my little turn it on, turn it off. And this will allow me to see it raw or parsed. And you should really, in the end, you're going to be making the API call with Fetch and then console logging it. But sometimes you're going to make the API call and you're just going to use your browser to look at it. I just want to see the data come in. And now that it's here, I can like expand things and go further into these elements and like kind of see the structure of the data, right? There's a lot going on here. When I look at this random user API, I see that it's an object that gets returned. There's a key called results, a key called info. Right, and info doesn't look like it has anything we want. It's like seed, results, page, version. And that's not really any info that I need. But in results, it's an array of one object. Oh, 12 items. It's actually one object with 12 different things inside of it. And then I can see that there's one thing in here. There's a gender, a female, that has a name of Miss Leia Singh, which is an object for first, title first and last. There's a location that also is an object with all the location info. You can see how nested this is, and all the information has been aggregated to make it, I don't know, I guess easier for you to parse it out or listen. Whoever decided this was the structure was just a preference. This isn't like the standard way to structure a user's information. There could be dozens of different ways to do this. This was one person's version of how to do this, okay? So let's just say this is the data, and if I go here and I'm like, hey, I want to do the random user, okay? So I want to fetch the data for random user. So I'm going to do it in a function, so I can just kind of call the function when I want, okay? And so when we're doing this, I'll zoom in a little bit, fetch is what we want to do. So when you run fetch, you're going to do fetch, and then you have to do the API here. So I'm just going to say random user, because that's got my API. I mean, I could take the whole thing, right? I think I could just do, I think it was with this also. Could do that, fetch with the API, or I could have just used random user as a variable, okay? Now, when I fetch the data, I need to do something with it. What you might think is you could do this, like, I don't know, let API data is equal to fetch. And then you could be like, oh, I think I got it, so I'm going to console log, you know, this is API data and API data, right? I'm going to call the function random user data. Just going to call it, right? It's already hard coded. Here it says like pass it in the API, but I've already hard coded it. And now if I go to the console, what is it saying here? Unexpected inputs 224. I think I might have left off a curly brace or something. So I'm going to do this. I don't know what's causing it, so I'm just going to get rid of all of these. Let me see. All right. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it. Let me see. Okay. What I see here is this. This is API data, and it's returning a promise. Does anyone know what a promise is? You know, you might have used fetch. You might have seen promise in the context of using fetch. Can anyone explain what a promise is? Just curious. Okay.
A promise is when it's waiting until the data is completely there, and then it runs whatever you have in the promise.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Promise has either a resolved or a rejected state. So JavaScript is it's asynchronous. Asynchronous meaning that it kind of runs line after line, and if one line is doing something that takes too long to do, and in this instance, I'm leaving the kind of scope of my file and going outside on the web and like asking a server to give me data. I'm telling, hey, give me some data. I don't know how long that's going to take. That could take a minute. That could take several minutes. The server may be having problems. The rest of the lines of code then execute. They don't kind of wait for this thing to finish running, nor does this thing return anything to this variable. Okay, what it's really storing is this promise. I want the data though, and like, how do I get the data? Okay, so we're never going to do this. Let me just put that right off the bat. We don't do that, okay? What fetch does is fetch has a callback, or it deals with the promises using a then method. So then, okay? And you're just going to have to kind of bear with this and see how this gets done. Now, when this sends back the data, it sends it back in a format that is a string-based format. And so I need to kind of parse it into its corresponding parsed format. That's the difference between kind of like this, which kind of looks like one big string, versus this, which looks like something that I can interface with, right? I can go, hey, Here object, give me the results, returns back an array. In the array, give me back the thing. Here, I need a way to do that. So I'm going to say res. You just have to like res.json. Okay, you're just going to have to kind of bear with me while we do this. Now, what this does is this first then right here is responsible for taking the data and converting it from its stringed version to a parsed version that I can actually use. Okay? What I mean by that is this. If I went here and I said, I don't know, like let object is equal to, here we go, like let obj is equal to that. Here's an object, right? Okay. I want to turn that object into a string of text. So I could say something like let string obj equal to JSON.stringify obj. Okay? Now, string, it's a string of text now. I've taken this object and I've turned it into a string, which means I can no longer do this. Object.first. Oh no, string object. String object.first. That doesn't work, but obj.first works. See, obj works because obj is an object, and so I can use dot notation to get the key that will return a value. I can't do that with this anymore because it's a string. The one thing that you have to know about servers sending data upon request is that they stringify the data. And they do so because it's a more efficient way of sending the data. I send it as a string, it's just an efficient way of sending it. But when I get the data, I have to convert the data, right? I can't use this, right? I already just showed you, I can't use it in this format. So I need to like get back the parsed version of the data. I need to get back this data. I got to go from here to there. And how do I do that, right? So we do that by using JSON. So I'm going to say JSON.string_parse, and I'm going to give it the string object. And now it's parsed it back into the object that I know I can use. So if I say let parsed equal to JSON.parse string object parse, now I can go parsed.first. Okay? Does that make sense? The fact that data being transported on the web is sent as a string because it's easier to send, but then when you get it, you have to convert it. There has to be a way to convert it. Even if I send the data, if I'm sending the data to the server, I'm going to send it as a string. The server will then convert it back into an object or whatever, okay? And so this is, when we do send it back and forth, this itself is considered JSON, a JavaScript object notation. And the difference between a normal object like this and JSON is that JSON, I just want you to take a look at this key, this first key, right? See, the first key doesn't have quotes, but Joe does have quotes. I'm going to go back here to random user. Do you see how gender has double quotes? Female has double quotes. Name has double quotes, but the object doesn't have double quotes, right? In JSON, the keys all have double quotes. JSON is very specific. JSON is the format by which data is being passed back and forth between the client and the server. We don't just send an object, we send an object that has been formatted as a JSON object, okay? And that's important to know. Now I'm bringing this up, this whole JSON parse and JSON stringify, right? I'm bringing that up because in our little code along here, right? I'm running this res.json. And what res.json is doing is it's doing the formatting, okay? So if I just put this on the next line here, I'm just going to add a comment here. We can add comments between this. Res.json is running under the hood, JSON.parse. Okay, that's what it's running. The data is returned, and it's doing its JSON.parse, and it's converting it back into something. Okay. Now fetch, once that's done, and you're like, oh, that's cool, I want to use the data now, I need to use another then method here. Okay, and then I'm going to say data, and then I'm going to console log, this is data, and let's take a look at data. Okay, so if I go back here and I run this, I'm going to clear this out, I'm going to save it, I'm going to run it. Now look what I got. This is data, it's an object, and it has info. Remember I said info wasn't really something we cared about, but results is something I care about. Results is an array of a single object, and that single object has all the information that we want. It has the gender, it has the email, the date of birth, it has all of this information about this random user. Okay, if I do this time and time again, if I refresh this page, you will see the email change, you will see their name change. As of right now, it's a female and her first name is Danielle. If I was to run this one more time, because it's the random user API, I will get another user. Let's see, take a look, and now it's a male, and the male's name is Joabi, right? Okay. The API is called random user, and so if I went to the random user API, all it does is provide random user information. It's a site people use to, like, I'm building out an app of like a site that allows you to choose developers. I don't really want to populate a whole table full of developers, right? I'll just pull these people. I got a picture, I got an email, I got contact info, I got everything I really need, date of births, whatever, and then I can use that to build out my app, okay? This is one really cool online tool. Another one's called Faker. We use that a lot here in our classes, okay? So when we do fetch, this is how we get access to the data. Because if I still did this, let data is equal to that, and here we go, API data, right? API data, and I console log, console.log, this is API data, right? API data. Let's see what that returns. Okay, I'm going to go here, I'm going to save it, I'm going to run it. All right, I'm going to get 2 console logs. This is the console log that has the data, and this is just still stuck at a promise. It just has a promise. Okay? This thing, it's, what's up?
If we were to console log as a callback for random user data, would it actually exist?
What do you mean a callback for the random user?
So if you have random user data on line 26, if you console logged as a callback for that, would it work?
No. The only thing we're going to get, this only returns a promise. This whole thing right here is one big promise. Okay? And the only way you get access to it, so when I'm teaching promises, and we don't really go into like the details of a promise, because now you're just walking down like the road of JavaScript versus what you need for React. And we don't have time to go over everything. But in a promise, think of it like this. I want you to go get the data. When you get the data, then do something with it. That's the intention of a promise. When the data has been resolved, then let's do something with the data. I can't do anything with the data until you are able to get your hands on it. Once you do, then I will do something. This middle then is just a requirement for the conversion, and then that sends the data to this second then. Now we have access to the actual data, okay? This does the conversion, this passes the data, and then we have access to the data, okay? But it's still stuck in here, so it's like, if you wanted to work with this, you need to call another function to pass it to get it out, to do something. Otherwise, this thing now becomes your scope upon which to actually run your app, right? If this is where my data is accessed, then I need to like give it to another function so that that function can work with the data and do something with it, okay? Cool. How we feeling about like just using fetch by itself, right? I feel like incorporating it into React might have just been a little bit too much, like just doing this alone to get you used to using the fetch to get the data. Now that I have it, say I wanted to get the person's first and last name. How would I do that? So I say I want to just console log their first and last name. How would I console log their first and last name? How am I going to do that?
This is data dot results dot name dot first name.
Okay, so let's take a look. Here's data.results. Results is what? What is results?
It's an array, so it's actually results open bracket the position, right?
Yeah, okay. So now I got results, and then I want to get their name. So keep walking me through it.
So it's results 0 dot name, because let's just drill down until we find the name.
Okay, so I'm going to go down, and name is, let's get their first name. So what would I do here?
Well, name's another object, so it would be name dot first.
Okay, so that's what I have here, right? Data dot results bracket 0 because it's an array, dot name because name is a key. This key returns an object. That object has a first key, and that key returns Rosalia, right? That should work, right? Obviously, when we run this again, it's going to be a different user. It's not going to be Rosalia. But if we run this, you know, I save it and I run it. Let's see what we get. Okay, look, now I got Tony. Okay. A lot of the times where people do struggle with this is that the structure of these apps themselves, right? If I just went back to the API, the structure of the data kind of loses people where they have to go all the way down this path just to get to, I don't know, their password or something, or their username. And so a lot of times people struggle with that. What you're going to find is that the structure of the data is going to be different depending on the API we make. And that if you do not know how to parse through and figure out how to baby step your way down to the actual key that you're looking for, right, the value that's being stored in a key, you're going to struggle trying to get it. Like a lot of the times people forget to put the 0, and then all of a sudden it's like, what do you mean? I don't know. I think it's there. If it's an array of objects, then we'd want to loop over results and like do something with the things in the middle, right? Cool. All right, why don't we do this? Why don't we take, it's 9:16, forgot about our break every hour. Why don't we take our 10-minute break? When we come back, we'll finish up with the APIs. Cool? Sweet. All right. If you have any questions, you can Slack me on the slide too. I'll be here. I'm just going to jump off video and mute myself. All right, so break time. I'm back at 9:26. We're back. All right. So that's our format for making a random user API call, right? So once again, storing it here won't do anything. So we always forget about trying to store it within that. And then this is the structure. You make the fetch call, give it the URL. First then is used to convert it into JSON. And the second then you have a handle on the data. So in our world of React, this is where you would update state, okay? I'm making a call to get data, and when I get the data, what am I going to do with the data? Well, I want to see the data, and the only way to get my component to re-render is to update state, right? So the question is, where would I do that? Where would I run that? So I'm gonna slack out this, okay? Since it's 9:27, we have much time to like do a lab. So I think we're gonna do this as a code along here. I'm gonna slack this out. Okay. Just slacked out this particular, and it's pulled from the other one too. I think the other one has the card. I just removed the other two and left deck of cards there. Okay. And so now it's in React. I pulled the card from a site like this structure for the card in case you're interested in like recreating these types of cards. Materialize. Okay. Does anyone work with what's this called again? Materialize is implementing Google's material design. Does anyone work with material design or implement it? Okay. Material design is a Google kind of layout, and they've defined the design that they use, and it's kind of taken off. And there's several of these libraries that that implement their version of material design. This one's just called Materialize, and it's got components, and you can take a look at like badges, and you know, I think I'm using cards here, and here are cards. And so I just pulled a card from there just to use it here. That's really all I did. Added the classes, imported the CSS, and that's why it looks like this. It even has some functionality, right? I don't want to build that out from scratch. Sometimes that's tedious. Okay. I have this thing. Now I'm just going to collapse render. How am I going to make the API call and then update state, right? Essentially, if we know that I have to update state, then I got to do state, right? There's got to be at least state. Okay. So maybe here I could say, I don't know, data, and I could set it maybe to an empty array. I don't really know. Am I getting one thing? Am I getting multiple things? I don't really know as of yet what exactly I'm getting. Now the question is, where would I run this? Like, where should I run this API call? Now, one component that I did introduce, I think maybe in the second week when we covered updating state. There was a component that comes with React, and it's called component did mount. Okay? Component did mount is a life cycle method. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to put here a life cycle method. Okay? React has a life cycle. Components have a life cycle. And component did mount runs at the end of the mounting process. Okay, so when a component is mounted, this is the last thing that runs, okay? Lifecycle method, which runs only once when the component is component is mounted for the first time, right? Components born into existence. This thing runs only one single time. Okay, this whole life cycle method, let me just see if, I don't know if the lecture has the life cycle methods in here. It doesn't have it. Okay. So if I was just to say React life cycle methods, here we go, React component. I'm gonna see, there's a really good drop down array. I think this might be it. Is it? No, it's not it. It's a really good site that has a drop down to show it, but this one doesn't have it. Okay. We'll cover, I'll go further into the React lifecycle. I just kind of want to get us in here first so we can make this call. So component did mount. This is where we're going to make the call. Okay, it runs only one time. Our component loads, and I'm like, oh, I want to see the data. Great. I want to make a fetch call. Now, I want to go fetch a new API. I don't want to fetch the old one. I want to kind of take a look at another kind of API. So I'm going to try my hand at this deck of cards API. Okay, so I'm going to go to deck of cards and see how I would construct this deck of cards API. So here's the deck of cards API. I'll slack it out too. And the deck of cards, we have to construct this in a certain way. Okay, now to construct this thing in a certain way, it's like, all right, shuffle the cards, create a new deck. All right, so it looks like here. If I run this, I think this will create a brand new deck of cards. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to run it. And it returns back a deck ID. Okay, so I'm going to slack this out also. It's going to give me back a deck ID. Okay, and it's with this deck ID that I can actually pull a bunch of cards. I really only want one card, but I want to take a look and see if I can get more cards. So I'm going to go here. Now, in order to draw a card, I have to run this. Okay, now I need the deck ID. This deck ID here, I'm going to need. So if I go here and I put that in, I'm not going to run it yet because I got to change the deck ID. I'm going to change it to this one that I ran. I'm going to go here. I'm going to get rid of that and put that. Now I'm going to say I just want one card. And I run it. I get a single card from that deck. Now I'm down to 51 cards. Now we can all use this. Just know if you keep doing it, I'm going to run out of cards. I'm not going to have enough cards to do it. So I can do this just for the sake of us doing this. I can say instead of one deck, I'm going to choose, I'm going to do this one more time. Instead of one, I'm going to say give me, I don't know, 10 decks of cards. Look, I have 500 cards, 520 cards. So I think 520 cards is going to suffice for us to do what we want. I'm going to go here, just going to make sure this works, and then I'll slack it out. So we could just use this. All right, I'm just going to get one card. And look, I got 519 cards. I run it again. Let me say if I run it again, I have 518 cards. Awesome. This is what we're going to be using. I'm going to select this out. Okay? That's going to be the API we're using. So I'm going to go back here. Now we have an API to work with to get a single card, right? And looking at the card, I know I want an image of a card. I want to see 5 of spades, right? So if I take a look here, it'll be the value is 5. This one's hearts, so it would be 5 of hearts, right? And then I'd be able to even say suit spades, right? Some pieces of information we can use here. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say fetch, right? Because I want to fetch. I want to fetch that API. I want to say once you get the data, then I need you to first get the response and convert it into JSON. Awesome. Now I've converted it into JSON. What do you want to do next? All right. Then with the data, I want you to do something with the data, right? And it's in here that we are going to update state. Now I'm going to just take a look to see what the format of the data is that's returned. It's an array that has a key of cards. I'm sorry, it's an object that has a key of cards of an array, and I'm going to want the first thing in the array. Make sense? Kind of like what we saw earlier. All right, cool. It's a object that has a key, so it is an object. So I'm going to say data. It is an object here, right? Because data is here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change this to card. Let's try this. Card. Okay. Want to make it make more sense. Data that has a key. What was the key again? Cards. Okay. Cards. That's an array, and I want the first thing. If I get the first thing, I'm going to get this information right here. Okay? I'm going to go back. Hopefully this works. How can I test that this works? Well, I can run or console log set state in one or two places, right? Oh, we didn't set state here. So that's it. This dot set state, right? Meant to do that. This is that. And let me just move this over. And then we have to end that. Okay. So this is what I've done so far. Let me slack it out. So okay. This is what I have. Okay. And now that I've done this, I should have updated state. How do I know that I've updated state? Right? I mean, I'm passing in this array. So this should probably be an object, right? Here it was an array. Here it's an object. This should be an object too, right? Or I could have just put the whole cards array in there, right? That may make more sense. Cards, actually that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put cards. I'll just do an array. All right. I'm gonna console log now. I'm gonna do this. Console log, this is state. Okay. And this dot state. Now I want to take a look at what's inside state. So I'm going to go here and let's take a look and see what's inside state. Okay. So this is state. I got an object that's empty and now it has something, right? I'm going to get rid of all of that. I'm going to run it one more time. Okay. I'm going to do this. I'm going to run it again. I want to see. Okay, source map here. Console is good. All right. The first time this runs, I have an empty array. The second time it runs, I have something. Okay? So what happens is, as our component runs, let me go back to my app. State this first time has nothing. And then the second time it has something because component did mount runs, component did mount updates state, right? Does it here, update state, and that causes a re-render, and then we have data to work with. Okay, that's important to know, is that there was nothing in states originally, and now there is something in state, okay? Now, a lot of the times when you do this, when you update state, I'm probably going to include another key here called is loading, okay? And I'm going to say true, okay? Because it's loading. And when I update state, I'm also going to say is loading false, okay? So what happened here? Oh, because I missed a comma here. What we're trying to do here is we need a way to determine if state has got the information yet, okay? Because there's nothing in this card object right now, right? Where's this data coming from? This data is coming from hard-coded values, okay? So if I go here, I see that there's an image that's hard-coded, okay? 5 of spades, right here, where is it? 5 of spades, hard-coded, okay? Spades, hard-coded. We don't want to see something that's hard-coded, right? We want to see the data that was pulled from here, right? So how do we do that? Well, if I was to go down here and say, I don't know, let me try this image. If I was to replace this image with what's inside state, so I'm gonna just take a look and see where the thing is. Here's cards, and here's the image, right? So within the array, I grab the object, and image would be the value, right? So what if I replace this with, I'm going to cut this, and I replace this with this dot state, right? Dot card. Now that's an array. I grab the first thing in the array, and I do dots image. Okay, now it's erroring out. Right? Cannot read property of image of undefined. Huh. Okay, I want to make sure that that path is correct though, right? So I'm going to take this and I'm going to do this. I'm going to kind of go back to the image so that it works, so I don't break it. I'm going to try this dot state dot card, grab the first thing, dot image. I just want to say, oh, this errors too. Okay, right? Image of undefined. All right, the only place I think I might be able to test this out without it erroring is this. So I'm gonna just cut this, and here I could test it, right? Because after state is loaded, I have this callback, right? And now I can say console log, this is state in callback, and now do this dot state dot card, right? Dots, it's card, 0 dot image. Let's see. All right. Do you see how I have the image now? Right? What I'm trying to show you is that if you try to render something and the data is not there, React flips out. React breaks. I know that I can grab the image, and that's where the image is stored. But if React tries to go into the thing to grab the thing and there's nothing there, React flips out and is like, I don't know what you want me to do, right? So I can't just decide to try to, right from the beginning, render the image here because React isn't like, the thing isn't there. That's where this comes in handy. This is loading, okay? If it's loading is true, then I want to render maybe like a is loading message. Like, hey, everything is loading. Once it loads, boom, then I'm going to load the information, right? And you see that all the time on the web, right? You go to a site and you see like the little ball going around and you're waiting to get the data and you're waiting to get the data. So if I go down here and I want to only return this if something, right? I could say something like this. If this dot state dot is loading, if that's true, I can actually do this. I think we might even be able to do this as a ternary. If that's true, then I want you to return, let's see if this will work. Return a div and say loading. Let me see. Not going to work. I think we have to do the return. Else return that. No, not going to let me do that. Unexpected token. Return.
I think you probably want to. Oh, yeah, that needs to be in the return, doesn't it?
Now, you can do multiple returns here. So I'm going to do this. Let me just try this. If I do this, I'm going to return this. Let me see. Okay. Okay. What happens is this. If this is true, it'll do loading, and then it would return this. Okay? What happens, you can only return one, any function returns one thing. The execution of one return statement negates this code from ever running. Okay? So if I was to go in here and not set this to be false, let's just say I got rid of this, and I didn't set it to be false. Do you see how it's loading now? It's forever loading. Even though I have the data, look, I have the data here. I have the data, and it's right over here, right? But it's in a state of loading because this got executed, okay? And even though we have the data, this is still true. It's always true. And since it's always true, this will always be here. The only way to like swap that is to go back in here and say is loading false, and then I get the deck of cards. Okay? You don't see it. It happens really quick. You'll see loading and then you'll see this. I mean, it happens so fast that we don't really have time for this to even happen. I could put this inside of something maybe like a set timer. If I did this, let me see. Oh, I think if I put it into a set, is it set interval? Set time out, right? So it set time out here. And if I did this, and I said, wait 1 second, and then run this line of code. Let me see. I'm going to put this in here. Did you see the pause? Right? I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to refresh the page. Watch what happens. Wait a whole second. Oh, that was pretty excessive. Wait a whole second, and then show me the card. Okay? If I said wait 2 seconds, if I change this to be 2 seconds, watch this. 1, 2, boom. Okay? What's happening here is what we're telling it is wait for the data to get pulled in. Once it's in, then show the data. Because if we try to show the data, now I'm going to go back here and change this to be this dot state dot card bracket 0 dot image. Okay. Do you see? Right? Now I get the card image. And I'm getting a different card, right? Now this is 7. I didn't update the rest of the information. But I'm getting the rest of, I'm going to set this to 1 second now, just so we can kick this off. Watch. 1 second, King of Hearts. King of Spades, right? Is that King of Spades? Okay. So one important thing to note with making the API calls is component did mount is where you make the initial call to get your data. Component did mount runs one time, only one time. Doesn't matter how many times this component is kind of refreshed where a state gets updated. This will never run ever, never, ever again. Only runs one time, okay? When it runs and it's making an API call, this kind of is loading is a mechanism that we can use to pause and wait for this thing to finish so that we can give them a loading screen, and we're not trying to render data that doesn't exist, because if we try to render data that doesn't exist, we're going to break React. React's going to be like, hey, the thing's not there and you want me to show the thing. There's no key there. I broke. And then you get something that's broken. Okay? So this return statement runs and it negates this return statement. This whole return statement doesn't ever get executed if this one does. It's just a thing in JavaScript. Okay? And so we can do this kind of pausing mechanism here. Okay? I know that was a lot for today. Just kind of doing more code alongs and showing you it, because making a fetch call requires all that additional overhead of learning how to make the fetch call, parsing through the data, and then kind of wrapping our head around component and mount and this conditional rendering here. Next class, we are going to go further into this. I'm going to change the fetch call to do something called, I'm going to show you in the reading, what I'd like you to take a look at for the reading, is the next iteration of dealing with those types of requests where we have to wait. Has anyone used async and await? You can just raise your hand. You used it? Used it? Okay. Async and await, awesome. If you used it, you know the functionality. Go through the article, because next class we're going to refactor what we did to use async and await. That way we can deal with the data kind of, I'm not going to say immediately, but we won't have to do this, right, as much. And this time we can just say, hey, wait for the thing, then wait for the thing again, and then I can actually have the data. I don't have to do it inside of the then. I actually kind of have a sequence steps of variables that I can use, okay? We'll cover that. That's in the reading. The only other thing in the reading was just using fetch so that you can get accustomed to doing it more. Okay. So how are we feeling about making API calls? So if I had to say like a fist of five, like in regards to making the API calls and doing it, one is, I don't know, still kind of don't really get it. 5 is like solid, I got it. What would you give me? 1, 2, 3, 5, 5, 4, 5. Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, looks good. So next class, we'll go further into it, and we'll start building more things out. We're going to finish this, pull multiple cards, and then render multiple cards instead of one card, right? Sweet. Meg, I just saw your question. Are we going to use Redux in class? As Joe mentioned, it was sure. Yeah, Redux is further down. That's like an advanced thing that we'll be using much later on. That's like an advanced topic towards, I would probably say like class 19 or something, like 17, 18, 19, something like that. Since it's a third-party tool and it's more advanced, there's so much to cover just in React in general. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to cap it. We do have, 6 minutes, so I'm leaving time for the exit ticket. So everyone has time for an exit ticket. And I know I follow up sometimes. I'm like, hey, fill out the exit tickets. But I really want to just see how everyone's feeling in the exit tickets in regard to this. There wasn't a lot of hands-on, as much hands-on as I wanted with the labs, but I tried to do it with the code alongs. And I have the video. I'll post the video like first thing tomorrow after it compiles. Cool. All right. If you got any questions, once again, just Slack me out. Slack me your stuff. If you're working on any of those additional ones, traffic lights, city pics, Slack me out. Be glad to help take a look at it. Otherwise, I will, we'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.